Growing up Asian has shaped my mindset in so many different ways. A set of very specific traits got ingrained in me through the culture, and for a long time I genuinely thought that these were strengths, that these were things to be proud of. But the older I got, and the more I socialized with people who don't come from the same background, the more I realized that these traits were actually kind of toxic. If you're Asian, and especially if you grew up in East or Southeast Asia, I think you already have a pretty good idea of what I'm gonna say. I'm putting this video out there in the hopes that it might help you recognize some of these patterns and unlearn them before it's too late. Because for me, I had to go through so many tough moments in my relationships before I could grow past this. And relationships with other people aside, a lot of these traits that make up the Asian mindset can seriously mess with the way you see yourself. If you're watching this and you're not Asian, maybe this video can still help you understand why your Asian friend or your Asian partner acts the way they do. I think that something that's uniquely Asian is the tendency to constantly scrutinize everyone and everything. Now, you might be thinking this isn't anything special since this is something that many other groups of people are known for, like the French, Germans, Austrians, Poles, and other Central and Eastern Europeans all do this. But I think there are two things that make the Asian mindset stand out even more. First of all, it's not obvious at all to outsiders that we think this way, since there's a cultural emphasis on appearing as civil as possible. Like, we're all taught how absolutely important it is not to run our mouths or blurt out what we think at any given time, unlike the other groups that I mentioned earlier. But the truth is, we're extremely harsh in the way we judge. This all comes from people constantly talking down to you and holding you to kind of unreasonable standards all the way from early childhood. And most of this pressure actually comes from your own family. Nothing is ever really good enough. Like, there are always things you need to change and things you could do better. And I'm not just talking about grades or music or sports, but also how well you perform in the house, how well you do certain chores, how you talk to people, your tone, your body language, how you carry yourself. Like, everything you do gets picked apart. Because of this, you almost never get a chance to soak in your achievements or just feel good about yourself in general. And this is also basically why the whole stereotype of Asian parents not accepting anything less than an A plus exists. There is some benefit to this kind of upbringing because it does push you to keep improving and it keeps you humble by conditioning you to think that criticism is the only valid form of feedback, which leads you to never take in any praise and always downplay your achievements. And this is pretty much why Asians have a reputation for being humble. What makes this toxic though is that eventually you start doing the same exact thing to other people. Like, you become hypercritical and you start picking apart other people's flaws and mistakes the same way yours were. I never thought I'd be the type of person to do this, but in every serious relationship that I've ever been in, I've had moments where I laid into my partner over mistakes that were so small and so insignificant in hindsight, just because they weren't doing things to the exact same standard that I always had to live up to. Most of my long term relationships have been with non Asian women, and I think that's what made this cultural difference painfully obvious to me. And when I think back on it, I've also been on the receiving end of this exact same treatment from the few Asian women that I've dated too. It's gotten a lot better with time, but sometimes I still find myself having to shut down that gut reaction of getting irritated by what I perceive to be incompetence and remind myself that people just have a different way of doing things, which is completely normal. So, even with the upside that this mindset can bring, the consequences can be so damaging that I'm not sure if it's worth it. And when I say damaging, it's not just to other people, but especially to yourself too. I think it goes without saying that getting treated like crap throughout your formative years and getting validation only if you perform perfectly completely messes with the way you see yourself. It just destroys your self esteem, and you grow up believing that you're not better than anyone else by default, that you're not capable of achieving success if you deviate from the life path that everyone's already prescribed for you, which is get good grades, get into a good university, get married, have kids, and raise them to do the exact same thing all over again. Honestly, it's just so sad to think about how many of us are stuck living lives we don't even want because of this conditioning. So many of us are dragging ourselves through the day, working corporate jobs that we hate and find no meaning in, just because we were brainwashed into believing that this was the only legitimate way to live. It took me so many years into my adult life to finally figure out that the most important thing is simply to know yourself, because that's the only certainty that you'll have in life. And tying your self-worth entirely to achievement is so stupid because you're always so obsessed with chasing the next milestone that you don't even stop to think about how you feel about all this. And more often than not, this just puts you on the path to a really bad crash out later on in life. Bottom line is, as long as we're able to provide something of value that people are willing to pay us enough for, we can live life however we want. And it's just so sad that so many of us never get to explore the value that each and every one of us can bring into the world because of this corporate mindset that's been so deeply ingrained in us from such a young age. I just started my business teaching French online to English speakers using this YouTube channel as my launchpad. It's only my third month, but I'm already making a sustainable living from it. I get to help other people so much with my specific experience and skill set, and a lot of it is stuff that only I can do compared to all of my peers. It just brings me so much meaning and fulfillment, but if it were only up to my family, I would have never even gotten anywhere near this point. I love my family, and I know that they only wanted the best for me, that they were only doing their best with what they knew back then. But why did I ever let them convince me that I was on the same playing field as everyone else? That I wasn't capable of doing something special on my own? You know, the more I spend time with my European friends, the more it shows that they've always been told, no matter what you do, we'll always believe in you and we'll always be proud of you. And thanks to that, they get to move through life with such a sense of confidence and freedom. On the other hand, if you're Asian, there's a pretty good chance that you'll go your entire life without ever hearing those words from the people that matter the most. Like, who knows what I would have been able to accomplish already if I had heard those words growing up. Having said all of that, if you're Asian, I feel like the most important thing you can learn is how to communicate all your needs clearly and how to set clear boundaries. Because these are things that we just don't know how to do naturally since our culture just isn't built that way, despite these things being fundamental everywhere else. And I've noticed that this is what always leads to meltdowns in relationships in Asia. And that's why I can't just excuse something like this as a cultural difference, because this doesn't even create good outcomes within our own culture. So it's just straight up toxic everywhere. Instead of just communicating everything straight up, we always try to predict what the other person is thinking, and we adjust ourselves accordingly. Even if there's something wrong, we don't bring it up, and we just try to make it through the issue through personal sacrifice and just putting up with it, because we don't want to risk making the other person uncomfortable by imposing a confrontation on them. This is seen as the noble thing to do, and the assumption here is that the other person will do the same for us, which in theory sounds pretty okay, but in reality, no one is capable of reading perfectly between the lines all the time. And so what always ends up happening is that people suppress their needs, then they build up resentment from feeling unseen over months or years, and then they eventually explode. The crazy thing is that this just becomes a cycle that repeats itself because we somehow never realize that the problem isn't the other person being insensitive, it's the lack of communication. The only reason why this pattern has survived for so long and still exists today is because we're all taught that enduring is a virtue, and that includes enduring shitty relationships and shitty marriages, and that's why most of us never bothered fixing problems like this. Navigating friendships and relationships in Europe has really forced me to confront just how damaging this approach is, because I put myself through a lot of hurt and misunderstanding just because I expected people around me to try to read my mind the same way I always did for them, which of course never happened. There were many things that my friends or partner either did to me or failed to do for me, and I always took it as them not valuing me enough or not respecting me enough to see how it was affecting me negatively. I also built up a lot of resentment from feeling like they didn't care enough to reciprocate the emotional labor that I was constantly doing for them. This would eventually lead to me blowing up at them for it. And every time they'd say the same thing. I didn't know it was that important to you. Why didn't you just tell me? And after enough versions of that conversation playing out over several years, it finally got to my thick skull that, yeah, how is it fair to expect people to know what I need if I never speak up first? How can you expect people to reciprocate care that they never even realize you were giving? It's not that people don't care about you or don't believe in you. It's just that you never even gave them a chance to show up for you in the first place. Changing this has been extremely difficult for me because this way of relating to people was drilled into me for more than 20 years, and this is the way our ancestors have behaved for millennia. I suspect that this instinct to be as agreeable and as non confrontational as possible might even be baked into our genes at this point. Thankfully, though, I have been able to make some progress on this, and dude, life is just so much easier this way. Just the simple act of telling people my boundaries and speaking up right away about things that bother me still makes me feel like an asshole, like I'm complaining about small things. But this is truly the only way to get through to people. Because again, most people do want the best for you, and most of them will try their best to accommodate you and your needs. And if being an asshole is the only way for them to know how, then that's what you have to do. A lot of us were taught that kindness means anticipating everyone else's needs and asking for nothing in return. But unless you're a saint, that's just a recipe for resentment and dysfunctional relationships. I love being Asian, but there are just so many generational curses that come with the culture, and it's our job to make sure that we don't pass them down. There are so many other things that I could have talked about for this topic, but for the sake of time, I'll just stop it right here. This video might not be that cohesive, but this is just stuff that I felt like I had to get out there eventually. Let me know what you think about this video in the comments below, whether you could relate to what I said or whether you thought I was just rambling. I always love reading what you guys have to say. In any case, I hope that this video was at least interesting enough for you and that you learned something from it. And yeah, until next time, have a great rest of your day. Bye guys, love you.